You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Cimino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. Yeah. Fred, your hair looks great. Hey, welcome to today, May 7th, 2025. Special guest, Jeff Wishart, is back, and he has a long title. You ready for it? Okay, let's go. Fellow at Science Foundation, Arizona, VP of Innovation Mobility at the Arizona Commerce Authority, and now Vice Chair of the SAE On-Road Automated Driving Committee, and honorary member of this podcast as he's appeared. This is your third time? Fourth time?
Hopefully third time's a charm.
Yes. Right? Oh, the other two were quite charming. They were quite good.
Great.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Great to see you guys.
Yeah. So one of the things we're going to talk about with you is the TRL, the Technology Readiness Levels. And I'm starting with that one because we did that podcast about a year ago, I want to say, where we got all into full self-driving and how self-driving cars work. And we had a whole section there on levels and how SAE does it one way and then it doesn't make sense that way. And I don't understand it. So talk to us about adapting the technology readiness level framework to automated vehicle development. Good night.
Sounds good. Well, I'll start by saying that this is not really related to the SAE J3016 driving automation levels. I still support those. Right. I know you guys have some issues, and some people do. Fellow, frequent guest Phil Koopman isn't enamored with them, I guess I should say. But so the technology readiness levels are basically a way. It's a two-prong thing that is a way of communicating where an automated vehicle is in its development, and also as a stage gate keeper of so you don't progress from one stage to the next without proving some level of efficacy. And so the TRLs, or technology readiness levels, TRLs, were developed by NASA for technology generically. It's not any particular technology that needs to be necessarily considered by them. So what we've done in this paper that we publish at SAE WCX, which is a conference in Detroit every year, is make these TRLs more applicable directly to automated vehicles. So basically, the scale is from 1 to 9. So 1 is you're just basically developing the concept, and then by TRL 9, you have a product that's ready for deployment. And so you can imagine all the stages in between as you're proving your technology, and you want to make sure that you are not, say, going on public roads before you've proven some efficacy in simulation, or even in a closed course. So you want to show some real capability in simulation, and then you build your prototype and start testing on closed course, and then you prove that out, and then you maybe graduate to going to on-road testing, but you always have a fallback test driver to make sure things, if something goes wrong, that you're there to operate the vehicle safely. And then you can take that fallback test driver out before you deploy it on public roads with no fallback, with no driver at all. So it's really a way of, again, communicating it so we're all agreeing on where the vehicle is in its development, but also making sure that we set performance levels and thresholds to prove that the vehicle is ready to move from one stage to the next.
Okay, and these are all guidelines, right? These are not laws. They're not any legislation. This is what you want a company, ideally internally, to follow.
Exactly. I mean, the way I see things happening is I'm putting out research, and I'm obviously not the only one who does that. Hopefully, you can get some sort of like a mini consensus around some research, and it becomes a best practice, or maybe something like an organization like the Automated Vehicle Safety Consortium puts out a best practice. And then SAE, which is a standards development organization, takes that on and makes it into a standard, which gives it the imprimatur of something that's a standard, right? Which is not the same, which is a higher level of I guess, authority than a best practice, but still not a regulation. But we do want to make these standards become a regulation, because even our standard doesn't need to be followed by anybody. It's a good idea to do it, but it's not necessary. So then hopefully state and federal regulators can take these standards and put them into regulation. So I'm hopeful that NHTSA will adopt, not necessarily whole cloth or without some modifications, but take these standards and put them into some regulations.
Okay. Has anybody started using these? Like we have Aurora just is saying, hey, we have no drivers in our semis, and they're driving between Dallas and Houston. Did you know, or I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot here, if you know that they internally went through this? I don't know if anybody knows.
No, I mean, the paper came out in April, so it's a bit early to expect anyone to be following it just yet.
Okay.
I'm hopeful. It'd be great to find out if someone is, and maybe someone's listening to the podcast who will come back and say, hey, we're already doing this. That would be great. But I'm working with some AV developers, and I'm hopeful that eventually we can get them on board. But I'm also, I guess, even if we skip the best practice side of things, I chair in addition to being the vice chair of the ORAD committee, underneath it there's the verification and validation task force. Fred's a member, and we will be talking next week about what kind of documents we want to be producing in the next couple of years. And this is going to be one of them that I will present and see how people feel about it. So even if we don't get like I said, the best practice, perhaps we can jump right to make it into a standard. So, and maybe I talked about this in the last podcast, but there are 3 different types of SAE standards, each with a kind of growing level of consensus. You start with an information report, which is kind of like a literature review. Once you have some more consensus, you have a recommended practice. And then when you have a lot of consensus, you have a standard. So this may end up being at lower level, perhaps an information report, but it still has, again, the imprimatur of SAE, which is a well-respected SDO or standards development organization in the community.
Okay, that's great. I think I'm up to speed on levels again. Fred?
Excellent.
Jeff, I wanted to thank you for putting this paper together. I think it's really important and useful to map things out. From my perspective, what you've done is collected a lot of loose ends and put them all together in a way that people can understand how to walk between all of these divergent or potentially divergent documents that are floating around. The TRLs, for our listeners, are technology readiness levels, have been developed for a long time and are used by a lot of organizations. They're used by military and commercial developers of machinery, for the most part, that are complex and that require a lot of not only engineering knowledge, but also a lot of inputs from the user community, as well as the environment that the machines will be used in. And the environment could be the public environment, it could be a military environment, it could be a lot. But if you dive into it and look at the TRLs themselves, and as part of the TRL process, you have a technology readiness assessment group, which are human beings who look at the evidence presented for the different TRLs and say, okay, yeah, it's good enough to move on to the next level, or it's good enough to move on to the public arena. But one of the things you wrote in that paper, Jeff, is that, quoting from it, TRL frameworks are being widely adopted by participants in the AV industry to address the maturity level of their technology, close quote. I'm completely unaware of that, and I was surprised to see that. Can you amplify on that a bit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that may have been put in by one of my co-authors. I think that as I said to Anthony, I don't know of anyone who's using my version of TRLs. But as I think you pointed out early on previous podcasts, the federal government and the trust came out with a paper. I think it was the GSA. They came out with a different TRLs for different agencies, and so there was a DOT version of it. And there was some participants from the AV community on that group that developed the TRL specifically for the DOT. And I guess I would say, with maybe it's been more a casual, at least publicly casual adherence to these rather than a publicly strict adherence where they've said, here we are at TRL 3 and we're now at TRL 7. So I guess I would say I would like to see people being openly and explicitly following these TRLs, because I think part of the problem is that the public is unaware of when or what stage of development a particular AV is. Are they testing? Do they have fallback test drivers in them? Are they now deployed, or are they still testing? And I think that's been part of the problem that the industry has with the public, and perhaps even with governments. I think sometimes governments don't know where these vehicles are in their development as well.
Well, thanks. Just for our listeners, it's actually by the GAO, the Government Accountability Office.
That's what I meant.
Produced in January 2020. And we will have the link up on our website as well, or in the notes, exactly where they're going to be, Anthony?
Yes, they'll be in the notes. And if you're listening now, just pull up your phone while you're driving down the highway. And I think Michael's okay with this, and just start looking and clicking on links. Right, Michael? We're good. He's shaking his head at me. No.
I mean, if you are in, Nevada in a level 3 Mercedes, yes, if you're willing to accept liability.
So speaking of Mercedes, because what you were just talking about, Jeff, there is the public doesn't know what mode these are in. And I like what Mercedes is doing. We're saying, hey, we're in level 3. We're putting all these teal colored lights on the outside. Good idea?
I think it's an excellent idea. I think that we need to know whether the automated driving system, ADS, is actually engaged and in control of the vehicle or not. So any way that they can do that. Now, the problem is it's not standardized. So, or I guess one of the problems is it's not standardized. So I may know that blue light means that the ADS is in control. I may not. And then the next vehicle might have a red light or a green light.
Right.
And how do we know which is which? But Michael said something interesting that I wanted to touch upon briefly. What secondary tasks, as they're called, can you engage in when these level 3 systems are in control of the dynamic driving task? And can you read? Can you be looking at your phone? Can you be sleeping? Can you be reading? Can you be watching TV? All these things.
Let me jump in for a second. You said level 3. We're not talking about TRL 3. When Jeff just referred to level 3, he meant the SAE automation levels. So a little confusing, but I wanted to make sure that we clarified that.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Yeah, again, my TRL, the framework that I developed are not related. Well, not specifically. they're different from the SAE automated driving levels. So just be clear on that. Thanks, Fred. So back to what I was saying. I think that all of these secondary tasks need to be enumerated explicitly and specifically for each one. Can you engage in that task or not? Because some of these take longer to regain situational awareness. So let's say you exit your operational design domain, and the vehicle, it says, okay, to the fallback ready user, so the person sitting in the driver's seat, okay, you now need to take over the dynamic driving task, or DDT. You need to have situational awareness, obviously, when that occurs. So if I'm sleeping, that's going to take a lot longer for me to regain situational awareness than if I was just daydreaming, for example, right? So I think that those different tasks need to be specifically enumerated.
Okay. And that's got to be done per manufacturer, per their system. This sounds insane.
It is challenging for sure. I'll choose that.
Challenging
term.
Is not the correct word we're going for, but thanks for playing.
I agree.
So I'm thinking of sorry, that teal light, because there's a driving school around the corner from me, and I don't know if this is required, but they always have student driver on the car, and so and that's the good indication to everybody. Is that a requirement, Michael? Is that some legal requirement, or is that just the company just being like, hey, don't get too mad at me?
I'm not aware of any legal requirement. That maybe it would be a state requirement, if anything, but I think it's mainly just, I mean, just to warn people that are around the vehicle to be patient with the driver and careful around a driver who's not quite ready yet.
I think Uber or Waymo should start doing that when it starts driving on the opposite side of the street. So I'm not drunk. I'm just a computer. Oh boy. Yeah. Hey, have you had more experiences with Waymo out in Arizona where you are? Because the last time you were on, you said it stole your girlfriend.
Yeah. No more stealing of girlfriends since, although she hasn't been here since. So,
well,
we're still together.
Okay.
She's in Panama.
Okay. The Waymo took a really long turn.
Exactly. Took her back to the airport. Right. No, I mean, I've ridden in a few more. Still the same kind of, it's still the same kind of experiences. I mean, I think that they're very good at nominal driving, right? I think that they are better from what I'm reading, my experiences, the data show that for nominal driving, they're quite good. They struggle, and I think you guys have talked about this, when they encounter things that they haven't seen before, they haven't been trained for.
Yeah.
They don't extrapolate very well, but they're very good at nominal driving, whereas humans tend to be pretty good at identifying edge or dealing with edge cases, but not so good at nominal driving. So it's kind of a mirror image of each other.
Yeah, I think some of the reporting this week, I know Waymo released some new safety data, and I've seen it say, it says that Waymos are better than that average driver at certain things, but also that humans are better at taking risks, which I think sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I have a report, an SAE Edge research report. Fred's is on the development team to help me reviewing these. And so this report's focusing on the safety benefits of what I see as the three types of features that are out there: active safety features, driver support, which is SAE level 1, level 2, and then automated driving features. And so focusing on that one, Waymo's come up with data, and I think it's very promising. I think that, but we don't have enough data. Even this most recent one is not enough miles driven. I mean, the human drivers in the US accumulate more than 3 trillion miles a year. And so Waymo is in my report at 33 million, I think it's around 50 million for their most recent report. But Rand, which is a consulting company, did a report a few years ago that showed that you would need 275 million miles, I should say, to be driven before the impacts on fatalities can become clearer. So we're still early days, but it's very promising. But having said that, I would say that the data that we're seeing, while promising, are not extrapolatable as Waymo starts to drive on highways, drive in inclement weather, and expand its ODD to different cities. And it's not extrapolatable to any other AV developer. So if AV developer X comes in next, we can't say, well, Waymo did really well here, so this one will also do very well. So I think we're still in very early days in kind of understanding the impacts of these vehicles in terms of their safety or their impacts to safety. But it's at least promising for Waymo.
Hey, I want to go back to TRLs just for a minute here. Because this underlies a couple of comments or a couple of questions I want to address to both Jeff and to Michael. So TRL level 6, the Technology Readiness Level 6, as described in the GAO document, has 3 points in it. The first is the operational environment, including user community, physical environment, and input data characteristics, fully known. Second question is, was the prototype tested in a realistic and relevant environment outside the laboratory? And the third question is, does the prototype satisfy all operational requirements when confronted with realistic problems? Now, the way the TRL system works is you have to address the answer to each of the questions and get a satisfactory answer before you can claim operations at that level. So if you're not able to satisfy all of those three questions adequately at TRL level 6, then you are at best at TRL level 5. That's kind of the way it works. As far as I know, nobody has been able to satisfy all of these questions or parameters or I guess qualifications you'd call it, for TRL level 6. And, Waymo's got well-documented problems figuring things out. The environments it's been tested in are pretty restrictive. And Tesla keeps killing people in full self-driving. So I think that the claims for high TRL levels are specious at best, really hard to support. So 2 questions. One for you, Jeff. First is, do you agree that the TRL levels for automation right now, today, can be claimed to be no higher than TRL 5?
Yeah, no, I guess I wouldn't agree, Fred. And I've heard you say this, and I'm glad we're having the opportunity to chat about it. So if you've got the benefit of having read the paper, you know that I have slightly different take on what TRL 6 is for AVs. And so while I think that we do address those questions that you mentioned from the GSA document implicitly, we don't have them explicitly in our document. So for TRL 6 for us, it's been tested in a closed course, which gets to, I think, questions 2 and 3 that you mentioned. And your results are such that are good enough such that it's now can graduate, I'm using air quotes, to go to being in testing on road. But prior to that, you will have been testing in simulation, where you would have covered a lot more of your operational design domain in your testing. Now, of course, you need to have a connection between your simulation and reality. Simulation is never has a fidelity of 1, but you need to know what that fidelity is. Even closed course doesn't have a fidelity of 1. They use targets that are not exactly like a human or exactly like a car. So you have to be able to make that connection. So for every test, you understand what the level of fidelity is. So I would say that what we've done is say that, okay, at TRL 6, you've done testing in a relevant environment, and you've done well enough that you can now graduate. So it's answering those questions implicitly. Now, have you done every single have you covered every single thing in your ODD? No, that's kind of impossible to do, I would say. But we need to. That's one of the big questions, I think, in the AV community is how much testing needs to be done, how much of your ODD needs to be covered, and we've got some work in this space that you obviously need to do a certain amount. It has to have a certain level of complexity, because if you're just doing all driving with no other road users, for example, that's not all that useful. So you need to do all sorts of, you have to consider both the different types of weather, or all different attributes, ODD attributes, I guess I should say, in your testing, as well as your behavioral competencies. Sometimes people confuse those two things, but you need to be testing, probing enough of those two kind of subsets to make sure that you're doing enough testing. But can you do all testing? No, that's not feasible.
Oh, thanks. Okay, good response. I appreciate that. So, Michael, a couple of questions for you. First is, who should be on the technology readiness assessment team that's evaluating, evaluating the TRL level for each vehicle? Who should be on that team? Should it include just the manufacturer? Should it include manufacturers and academics like Jeff? And Jeff could probably use the work, by the way.
Appreciate the plug.
I would
should it
say
be the public, or who should be on that? The state police?
I definitely think you're going to need to have. Well, I mean, if you're looking at a specific operational environment, for instance, say the ODD is downtown Phoenix, I would suggest that in addition, you're going to have a manufacturer there as part of that team. I would suggest that you might want someone from the federal government as well, someone from NHTSA's automation safety group or their research group there. And then a local representative would probably be nice, just because every specific area has its own peculiarities. And then, I don't know, I also, to throw in, you might want an independent expert from academia or from, another AV manufacturer who doesn't have an interest in the manufacturer that's being evaluated, to provide that perspective as well. I don't think we should pick random citizens off the road and thrust them into this. That it doesn't sound like, I don't think they would have too much fun doing it. But beyond that, they might not be able to contribute that much. But I think you should have a range of expertise on board in making that determination.
I think that's a great point, Michael. And I've got some thoughts on that, because so what we tried to do with this paper is, and thanks, Fred, for describing it. For each TRL, to satisfy each TRL, to move from one TRL to the next, you have to satisfy our safety case framework. So the safety case is really becoming I guess there's a consensus around that using safety cases is the way to go to kind of ensure safety for automated vehicles. I think the community is really rallying around this concept. And a safety case is basically saying, don't just make a claim. You have to provide evidence for your claim. And so you can have if people are interested, listeners are interested, you can go to, say, the Aurora safety case framework, where they decompose a top level claim that they're safe enough to be on public roads, and they decompose it all the way down. And then for each of these claims, there's evidence to support that claim. And so what we did is, for our safety case framework, it's 3 pillars. We've got a safety management system. So basically, the organization has a culture of safety, has a way of making the organization itself values safety, prioritizes it. We've got design methods. So did you follow accepted design standards when you were developing the design of this automated vehicle? And then third, testing. And testing gets probably most of the attention. But it's just one of 3. And so for each of these pillars, there are standards, because as Fred knows, there are a multitude of standards out there. And so how do you know which ones to follow, which ones you can ignore or pay lip service to? What we want to do is, okay, I'm at TRL 3. For each of these pillars, there are these standards that or regulations. I mean, as the case may be, as standards become regulations, am I compliant with this regulation or conformant with this standard? And I want to be explicit about that I am stating unequivocally that I am compliant or conformant with those documents. And so unless I can show that, I can't move to the next TRL. But how it gets, I guess, audited or assessed, that's open, and that's where Michael was going. I mean, there are companies, if we're in Europe, companies like TÜV Süd, TÜV Rheinland, who will do that evaluation, because they do that. They do Type 1 certification over there. And so maybe that's something that we can have here as well. We have approved evaluators of a safety case. And so that they approved evaluators of the TRLs, so they can sign off on moving from one TRL to the next. I think that's another option. But I think involving a swath of the public and government, I think I could see that happening as well.
Yeah, and that sounds like what Edge Case Research, who we've spoken to before, does in the United States. I'm also looking at the TRL 6 that the Department of Transportation has in this GAO document, and the first question just seems really a kind of a difficult barrier generally. Is the operational environment fully known? that question is kind of I don't know. How do you fully know anything? Even if you're just looking at a specific operational design domain like downtown Phoenix, I think it would be hard to be honest and say, yeah, I fully know everything
Oh,
before
someone has a
proceeding past that. I don't want to dip too deep into epistemology and philosophy here, but that just seems like a stumbling block for anyone trying to get technology ready using the DOT's readiness levels.
Yeah.
Let me jump in here again because I got a corollary question for you, Michael.
Okay.
So recognizing that TRLs go from 0 to 9, right? And recognizing that there's some question about whether the current technology is a TRL 5 or TRL 6 or something. What do you think is the minimum technology readiness level for any given automation level before that vehicle with the technology is allowed to enter commercial service?
Well, I mean, it's got to be it's got to be past at least what? No, it's got to be at 9, right?
That's what I would say as well.
Yeah.
That's how we define it. TRL 9 is when you're in commercial service. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not continuing to improve, but you've met a bar and you could regress, right? And go back to TRL 8 if things don't go well. But at TRL 9, yes, you've proven efficacy with and without a fallback test driver. And now you've graduated, again, air quotes, into TRL 9 where you can enter commercial service.
So this is my chance to rant. Because right now, right now,
before he starts ranting, go to autosafety.org and click on donate.
There's plenty of time to do that. That's right. So here's the rant. Right now, the developers are spending enormous amounts of money to do two things. One is to create the illusion that commercial service is just fine because everything's going just fine. We haven't killed anybody yet, so why don't we do more of it? And yet, not believing that themselves, really, they're entering legislatures at the state and federal level to try to skip around this whole process by saying that, you don't have to do anything. You're good enough. And by the way, this is a nationwide standard that says you're good to go. You can do what you want with as much frequency and as many places as you want. So I think that really, if we've got a disciplined process, as you described, we've got the requirements that are being developed. We can put together a technology readiness assessment team, including all of the appropriate stakeholders. And why don't we do that? What are the manufacturers trying to avoid? We know how to do it. We know where to do it, and we know why. What's missing here?
Yeah, it's a great question, Fred. I wish I could answer that. I will say that what I'm trying to do with my work is always being aware that right now we're not getting a lot of data from industry, right? We get the standing general order data, which are useful in terms of crashes, but we don't get simulation results. We don't get them showing that they're conformant with one of the standard X or standard Y. And what I'm trying to do is make it so that we don't have to get into proprietary details, but showing that you are conformant with something. And perhaps there are trusted third parties like Edge Case Research, like TÜV, who can come in and they're independent and they can audit a safety case. Get us to a point where we're sharing some of the data, but not all of the data from the AV developers. I know that's been a sticking point for them. They don't want to just share everything, right? They want to know what is going to be done with what they're sharing. And so and on the other side, we need to have good reasons why we're asking for data to be shared. So we need to get to a point where here's what we agree will be shared, and here's what we're going to do with it. And this will allow us to make that assessment.
Oh, thanks. That's a great point. By the way, people do that all the time. And in my experience in the military, proprietary information is included in all of the design reviews, and it's protected quite well. and it's protected from competitors as well. But all the competitors have to reveal its proprietary details in order to go through the procurement process. So I do think that particular point is a red herring brought up by the manufacturers to try to avoid any exposure to this disciplined qualification process that we're talking about here.
What if we have all the manufacturers put all this data in a signal chat, and they'll be better that
Well, that's
way,
only for
right?
high security.
Okay.
There was actually I think there's a bill pending on Capitol Hill that basically sets up a sharing program with manufacturers. But the whole point of the bill is to prevent any type of access to that information by the public. But even beyond that, it wants to prevent NHTSA from using any data derived from that sharing process in its enforcement action. So it's basically saying, yeah, we know we know that you can see there's a defect in our vehicle in the data, but you can't use that to make us pull it off the road. So it's really problematic.
Well, that's just more insanity. I want to know with the current AVs that are out there, when they move from market to market, from ODD to ODD, are they using the same software? Because the reason I ask is because we found out with some Tesla whistleblowers that their artificial intelligence is somebody drawing lines on a map and being like, "Hey, don't hit this." I mean, so there's little to no proof that they're not using anything more than just basic object detection software you can download off the internet. Do we know, like, is Waymo, do they have a driver specific for Arizona and then they adjust it for, for Austin? Because like I can take my Dodge Dart and it'll drive in Cincinnati and it'll also work fine in Miami, and it will adjust to the road conditions. Maybe I need snow tires, but
yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that, well, they haven't really said anything publicly that how different the versions of software that are being used in different deployments. There is a process that they go through when they're planning to enter a new city. They come and they spend a lot of time first mapping, right, with LiDAR to get the HD maps, high definition maps. And then they will drive around with fallback test drivers in there. And then they will pull that out before they go into commercial service. So like I said, they're kind of implicitly following the TRLs, and then they'll enter commercial service. So there is a process that they go through. It's not just they drop a vehicle in and go. So I imagine there are differences in the software, but the extent to which those differences are visible to us, that's very minimal.
So I'm thinking, because then it's more.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask Jeff this question. So Michael mentioned earlier that there was a report that says Waymo is the safest thing in the world and it's better than sliced bread and all kinds of nice things. In their report, they talk about the Waymo driver as though that's a stationary thing, right? And the Waymo driver has put together, 500 million, 50 million, whatever number of miles it is. But it's my understanding that there have been many different versions of software that are included in the Waymo driver. And wouldn't it be important for them to say that we have allowed all of this data to be accumulated within the Waymo driver rubric because it's all similar enough and we've done regression testing and these things have changed, and they haven't done that. And Jeff, what's your opinion about how much stability is required in the configuration of a vehicle before it can be reasonably presented as, a single driver or a single AV technology?
Yeah, it's a great question, Fred, because how big a change needs to occur before you have to say, well, we're back at TRL 3, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, if you were to say, okay, I'm replacing my LiDAR with this unit, or taking off the LiDAR from the top and putting it just on the front bumper, right? So that you can see that's pretty obvious. Okay, that's a major design change, and so we need to really go back and make sure that all of our previous results are still valid. But a software change, And as I said, I mean, even at TRL 9, when you're deployed, you're still going to be changing. You're still going to be encountering new scenarios and new objects. And so you're always going to be updating your software. So how much of an update requires a regression of TRL to a previous one so that you can, and at the same time, or I guess, looking back at all your results and making sure that this design change means that all the other ones are still valid? It's a great question. I don't think that we've answered that. That goes along with how much testing needs to be done, how much testing needs to be done after a design change and of a certain size, right? I don't think that we know. It's certainly not in any standard, but it needs to be there.
Thanks. This actually would include your perspective on this, Anthony. So my belief is that, or my expectation is that it would be legitimate to include an updated software in a version that you're accumulating for safety statistics if all the software upgrades have been regression tested and passed that regression testing, and also all the new features that are in that software have been validated through a disciplined test process. And Anthony, I think that this matches your experience in the commercial software industry, right? Isn't that more or less what they do before you go from, dot 2 to dot 3?
Yeah, and it goes wrong all the time. I mean, all of us experience it going wrong all the time, but your phone's not going to kill you. It's going to get inconvenient, but that's the thing. And especially with, your phone and your computer and whatnot, vast majority of them today are not some unknowable neural network that I know what my input is, I know what my output is, but I don't know how it got there. And with the claims of a lot of the AV companies saying, well, hey, we're using artificial intelligence. Well, first of all, define what that means. And that, that gets into epistemology. But then it's just seeing, what does this change actually mean here? What happens? I think that's from a safety point of view. I don't know if that's knowable. I mean, it's got to be very open to the public of saying, you can't have these opaque release notes when, hey, here's the latest version. I don't know if there's some way that if I'm in my car and, hey, there's a new software update, that I can be like, no, I don't want that. Because a lot of the software updates are, hey, we're putting advertising on the screen while you're driving and a whole bunch of shit you don't want. But then there's other stuff like, hey, we put in security fixes here because China is going to hack you or something like that. Okay, I want that too. But, this change here for advertising, all of a sudden my backup camera doesn't work. But it's an AV. I don't care about a backup camera anymore. Computer's doing it. Solve the backup camera problem, Michael. Done.
I think, Fred, that, you want to make it incumbent upon the developer to show that any change that they make, hardware or software, it does not invalidate any of their previous test results. And so how that's done, how that process is done, I guess is up to the regulator. But I think it's a critical thing. We can't just assume, as Anthony was describing there, that you go from version 0.1 to 0.2, that everything is now still the same and just better. I think that's a critical part of the process that needs to be developed.
Yeah. How do we do that? Hey, listeners, if you know how to do that, you're probably sitting on a ton of cash that you can donate to the Center for Auto Safety. Autosafety.org, click on donate. Hey, Jeff, before we jump into recalls, I want to make sure I didn't miss this. There's the Edge report, or have we kind of covered this?
SAE Edge research report.
Yes.
It's still in development, hopefully published in the next few months.
Okay, great. So this is what you and Fred are both working on?
Yeah, I'm the lead author. I asked Fred, belatedly, apologies, Fred, to join the development team. And basically, these are SAE publishes these reports to, I guess, discuss topical issues in automotive. And so mine's on the safety benefits of advanced features like active safety, driver support, and automated driving.
Okay. All right. We're looking forward to that. You'll have to come back when that comes out. And mainly just explain to us what it's like having to work with Fred that closely. all the time. I mean, oh, you're still here.
It's a joy.
Shall we do recalls? Sure, that sounds great.
Sure.
Okay,
Strap
first
in.
one.
Time for the recall
Company
roundup.
called Zooks. 270 vehicles. I like this because it's their ADS software version 24.32 and affected prior releases to April 17th, 2025. Zooks is Amazon's level 5, SAE level 5 car. It has no steering wheel, no brakes. Maybe it has a big red button. I don't know. It can't deal with backing out of driveways when someone's coming down the road, or it can't deal with people backing out of the driveways. I don't know what's going on with it. I don't want to get into the thing.
Yeah,
Unless it's
it
in an
looked like
airport.
it looked like that there was a vehicle backing out of a driveway perpendicular to the Zooks vehicle that was traveling down the road. I think the Zooks saw the vehicle slow down or stop and decided it could continue. The vehicle then continued. It's not totally clear, but from what they submitted to NHTSA, that's what I'm getting. The Zooks vehicle continued and hit the car that was backing into the road or coming out of the road from the driveway. And I believe they suspended their operations in Las Vegas and then have now resumed after updating those vehicles with a new software update. So they fixed that one situation. Whether or not they have completely fixed that problem is yet to be known, I suppose.
Well, we don't really know whether or not that was one of the design objectives. That could be they're trying to swat the competition, or it could also be that Ukrainian AVs drones somehow their software gets switched into the vehicle. We simply don't know.
Just a quick clarification, Anthony. It's level 4. Level 5 means you've got basically no operational design domain. You can go anywhere.
Oh, okay.
They clearly do have an ODD, so they'd be classified as level 4.
Thank you.
Level 5 is also known as the unicorn.
Right.
Exactly.
I thought level 5 just meant no steering wheel, no pedals.
No, you could have no steering wheel or pedals in a level 4 if they design it like that. No one's done that just yet, although the Cybercab may be that if eventually, because we may see that because that's what they released that I guess that 2-person vehicle. We may see vehicles like that, but it doesn't have to be. You could choose to put that in or not. The driver controls.
Right.
And to just be mind-numbingly clear, you can be an SAE automation level 4 while simultaneously being a technology readiness level 3. Okay,
Absolutely.
so they run in parallel, but they're unrelated to each other. So,
yeah, thanks, Fred.
I just like the fact that Zooks suspended operation when this happened. That's no one else has done that. No, like Waymo hasn't done that when they've had issues saying, hey, let's stop everything and figure out what went wrong. GM Cruise, what happened to them?
well, I think they may have seen what happened to Cruise and took a lesson from that.
I think that's good. Next up, Polestar, 27,816 vehicles. The 2021 to 2025 Polestar 2 rear view camera. Gee, why? Of course, it's the rear view camera.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rear view camera. It's also, anytime I see a recall on a rear view camera and the word infotainment comes up, I cringe because I still won't, I know they're not listening to me, but I still think it would be smart for manufacturers to isolate safety systems from infotainment and all the potential software problems and stuff that goes through infotainment systems, because we continue to see this issue of entertainment screens interfering with the safety of the backup camera. So once again, I'll make that plea. I think that there's an update coming. I don't know if Polestars have over-the-air updates, but it's going to be a software update. And owners are going to hear about that from Polestar in about a month.
Okay. Last one, Volkswagen, 5,637 vehicles, the 2025 ID Buzz. Wait, really? Didn't they just recall all of them like a week ago? Oh,
Yeah, they've had a few problems. I think they've had a few recalls. I actually saw the first one I've seen the other day in a garage in DC. It was pretty neat looking. Didn't quite, I mean, it still looks like a hippie van, but it's, it's a neat looking van. This one's an odd recall. So they built the rear bench seat too wide. They basically have two seat belts on it, but the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 208 and also another reg that NHTSA has, 49 CFR Part 571.10 requires a certain number of seat belts if you have a dictated amount of space on the seat. And in this case, they built the seats large and they only included two seat belts when they should have had three seat belts on that bench seat. But instead of, replacing the seat or adding a seat belt to a seat, which may not be all that safe and is probably very expensive, Volkswagen has decided instead to add some padding to the rear bench seat that decreases the amount of space you have in those vehicles on those seats. So I'm not too sure how many owners are really going to want to get this recall performed, because it's basically taking cargo and person space out of their cars. But at the same time, you can't put a passenger in those seats without them being buckled. So it's an interesting, it's not really a fix so much it is, adding panels to reach a compliance level. So an odd little recall and an odd approach there from Volkswagen.
they should just, give them a thing of duct tape. Just be on with it. That will work, right? No? Hey, that's all of our recalls. I got nothing else then.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, Jeff, thanks for coming by again. Always
thanks,
a pleasure.
Jeff. Always good to have you on.
Appreciate it, guys. Great to chat with you again. Love it.
Before you go, I got to ask, do you think we'll have an AEB standard before the Cybercab is released?
Well, I mean, we do have a regulation. We have a final rule, right, for AEB that includes pedestrian AEB, which is great. It might be revisited by the current administration.
Yes.
We'll see.
Trick question.
But yeah, that's I don't have those tea leaves in front of me, so I can't read them.
All right.
I'm going to say we will have more certainty on the AEB rule before we have certainty on Cybercab. I think that's a pretty safe prediction.
I think that's fair.
All right.
I would agree with that one.
All right. With that, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.